How realistic is this report yesterday that the Giants could and will pursue both Aaron Judge and Trea Turner? We'll get to that question and so many more next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, a mailbag edition of the show. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions. I'm overwhelmed with questions, so we're going to kind of break these up, probably do a couple of mailbag episodes this week. But the first couple of questions come from Manny and Anime Consumerism. Manny says, what is your reaction to the latest report that the Giants intend to go after both Aaron Judge and Trea Turner? What would that mean for Crawford or Estrada if they sign Turner? And Anime Consumerism says, how realistic would it be for the Giants to succeed in getting both Judge and Turner? Bob Nightengale said that the Giants plan to be very aggressive in pursuing both. And so, a couple things. Number one, it's rumor season. We hear rumors all the time, and this is an offseason where talk is cheap, and I'm not going to... This is an offseason where they actually have to do something about this, and they just being involved in the rumors isn't enough. And number two, Bob Nightengale is not necessarily the most reliable of sources when it comes to stuff like this, right? They've got to put out content. I also think the Giants get used by agents out there, say the Giants are interested, because they're always lurking as a threat, and agents want to drum up interest in the clients. Of course, there's going to be interest, and the Giants, I think, are going to pursue these guys. The third thing I want to say is that the way I interpreted what Bob Nightengale said when he said they're expected to pursue both, it didn't mean they're expected to try to get both of them. I more so read it as they're going to explore, because you don't know when the player is going to make a decision and pick somebody else, and you want to have done your homework and gone down the road with the other one. I don't know. I mean, it's possible that they could get both. I certainly wouldn't put money on it at this moment in time. It would be great. I wouldn't rule it out because, when people say, oh, they won't spend the money, they're going to get to at least 160 plus million on the payroll for next year. And if Rodon opts out, which he will, they'll be at $70 million committed to next year's team. And so, yeah, you could add a couple $30 million a year salaries and still only be at $130 million. Although that's not factoring in arbitration raises, and there are going to be some of those. But what I'm trying to say is, let's just get one of them first before we start worrying about getting them both. Obviously, that would be fantastic. But if they could come away with one of these two guys, that would be a fantastic start. And there's other kind of second tier players that they could come away with. And if you pair them with one of these two, that would be a great offseason. And so what would it mean for Crawford or Estrada if they sign Turner? I mean, I don't know. It depends on Turner's willingness. I'm sure it would be discussed when you're pursuing him, what position he would play next year. He played second base with the Dodgers when they had Corey Seager. And so he could play second. Estrada played some left. I wasn't all that impressed with Estrada in left when we saw it this year. And I think he's done it in the past as well. But it helps to have guys who can move around, and we don't know about Crawford's willingness to move around. So this is a problem. To me, it's fixable. We're not going to sign Trea Turner because of Crawford and Estrada. There's no way that those guys are going to hold that up, and they would figure something out. One of them or more than one of them would have to move positions, perhaps even just temporarily with Crawford's contract up after 2023. And you never know who's going to get kind of injured, Crawford could get hurt and then problem solved. So, I mean, it would be another problem, but positional issue solved. Anyway, Yeah, my reaction, I hope I expressed it there. Next question comes from Candlestick Will, who gives a more realistic, I don't know, a more tempered down perspective on this, who says, obviously we're going to go after Rodon, Judge, and the elite shortstops, but assuming we strike out on all 6, who are the best available free agents to go get? Who can help us the most defensively, and who are the best arms? So when I first read this question, I thought you meant who has the best arms among the defenders. So I kind of prepared by thinking of position players. And so we'll save the arms for another time. But yeah, so who are the best free agent position players besides Judge and the elite shortstops? It's a good question because, yeah, they very well could miss on all those guys. I hope that they don't, because what I've kind of learned when I've got all the free agents written down and even highlighted some of my favorites, and then looked at kind of what was their sprint speed this year and what was their outs above average this year. Better to kind of look at a 3-year sample, I think, but this is all I've done so far. And what I've learned here is that it's a very top-heavy free agent class. There is some elite talent at the top, like you mentioned. I mean, I don't know, I didn't count, but 6 sounds about right with Judge and the shortstops. I don't know who the others are you're referring to. But after that, like, there are some mid-tier guys, and then there's just a fall-off. And to me, like, the Giants, if they really want to improve, Farhan Zaidi has talked about making trades, and so that opens up a whole other world of possibility to try to improve your roster. But if they're going to do anything through free agency, there are some guys at the top and then not much after that. But after the shortstops and after Judge, to me, the clear next best guy is Brandon Nimmo, whose season just ended. The Mets were eliminated. Brandon Nimmo is just kind of everything the Giants like in a player in terms of what he does at the plate. He doesn't necessarily hit for all that much power. That could be one thing that's kind of missing from his game in terms of what the Giants like. But other than that, like, the ability to make contact, the ability to swing only at the best pitches for him to swing at, draw a lot of walks, super high on base percentage, doesn't really have platoon splits. And despite being, a left-handed hitter, not having platoon splits and being able to hit lefties. And then I think what a lot of people don't know about Nimmo, 84th percentile sprint speed this year and 91st percentile outs above average. He can play center. I think he's better suited in a corner, but he can play center. Kind of one of those guys like Mike Yastrzemski, probably better in a corner, but can play center. And so Nimmo is there. And besides that, there really is a drop-off when I'm looking at, okay, not the shortstops. There's Gene Segura, who I think is a little bit of an underrated player, still playing in this postseason with the Phillies. This year, sprint speed, 58th percentile. Outs above average, 87th percentile. He's a second baseman. I wouldn't be too excited if the Giants ended up with Gene Segura, but he's just a solid player. I don't know, Thairo Estrada type player. Just solid, but unspectacular. And there's Brandon Drury, who's had a really nice season this year. 71st percentile outs above average, but not much of a runner. You've got Wilson Contreras as a catcher, but then you start to go, where's the fit there per se? Justin Turner is out there, but he's not a good defender or runner at this point. There's a club option the Dodgers hold. They could pick it up. There's Joc Pederson. We all know about him. Mitch Haniger, I like quite a bit. He is a local guy. I would not be shocked if the Giants ended up with Mitch Haniger. Didn't get the data on this year's sprint speed and outs above average because he didn't play enough because he was injured for much of the year. There's also Joey Gallo, Anthony Rizzo, Jose Abreu. I like him as a first baseman, kind of a different type of offensive profile. Impacts, kind of an impact bat, but does it with like high batting average and some power as opposed to the classical, doesn't hit for a good average, but really slugs. He makes a lot of contact and gets a lot of hits at that first base position, but he's 36 years old. So, yeah, there's just not much there. The guys I mentioned are kind of the guys, and then there's just not much else there from the position on the position player side. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, we're going to turn our attention to a couple of hypothetical offseason scenarios. And the question is, what do I think about these potential offseasons? Would it be enough? How would I feel about if the Giants did this? So we'll get to that in just a second. But first, the numbers don't lie. And if you know me, I'm all about the numbers. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. I know because I use SimpliSafe in my own home. They protect you with cutting-edge technology powered by 24/7 personal, professional monitoring agents who always have your back. The main thing for me is just how easy it is to control from the app and being able to watch those crystal clear HD live streams of my security cameras anytime. So in addition, the technology can move with you, which is a big deal. I've moved a lot. And so being able to just pick up and move the elements and take them with you to your new place is not something you can always get from those built-in security systems. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, as promised, more questions and answers. The next one comes from Alex, who says, sign Judge, re-sign Joc, and trade for Rhys Hoskins, the Bay Area Bombers. Thoughts? The merch would be fire. So yeah, Rhys Hoskins, that's a good point. These guys are Bay Area natives, and I believe all of them grew up Giants fans. I know Judge and Pederson. And so the one issue I have is that Rhys Hoskins, as much as I like what he does offensively, he's kind of known as a poor defender. And I, for whatever reason, have ended up watching some Phillies games. I watched quite a bit of Phillies games throughout the year. And man, Rhys Hoskins has some trouble at times at first base. So first base is not necessarily a position where there aren't a lot of great options out there for like plus defense and for hitters. But Rhys Hoskins has problems defensively at times at first base. He has been used in the outfield in the past, but that's certainly a thing of the past. They will need to figure out something at the first base position, but I see it as pretty unlikely that the Phillies end up trading away Rhys Hoskins, especially because they're a competitive team right now and they probably want to keep their first baseman. So I like the idea. Judge and Joc, certainly a good start, but Rhys Hoskins not my favorite. Why not just sign Jose Abreu? I think you're going to get something kind of similar, and there are other options out there. Josh Bell, another guy who can hit but isn't a great defender. So, yeah. Next question from CJ, who says, Nimo, Correa, Bassett, Joc, Scott Alexander. Would this be a good offseason? You get another true center fielder, so no matter what, you have two center fielders in the lineup each day, and a good defensive middle infield bat is added. Plus, you add a proven starter. So let's see. Nimmo, Correa, Bassett, Joc, and Alexander. I'm going to say that's not a good offseason because it's not quite enough. I think Correa and Nimmo, okay, it's hard to complain if you get Correa and Nimmo, but I'm going to complain anyway. I just think maybe I'm underrating Correa, and I have someone pointed out on the last mailbag that I have a blind spot for Correa, and I think that that's true. I think Correa has the potential to be that impact player. I mean, he was one of my favorite players before the cheating scandal with the Astros, but after that, I've just kind of soured on him, and I do have a blind spot for him. But to me, like there's Judge, and there's Turner, and then there's like Xander Bogaerts. I kind of have maybe above Correa. Perhaps that's wrong. Maybe the problem I have with this is Bassett. I don't really see him as much more than an average starter versus you'd be losing Carlos Rodon in this scenario. And going from Rodon to Bassett, I think, is a pretty significant step backwards. And then Joc Pederson, while productive with the bat, just not productive with the glove. And so you're improving your defense with Nimmo and Correa, but it's just not enough for me. And then you've gotten worse in the starting rotation. And then, by the way, Scott Alexander, we got a couple of questions about this. He is under club control for one more season. So they can bring him back if they want to through the arbitration process. So for me, this is a solid start. I would be somewhat disappointed in this, but also it would be a step in the right direction for this team that has been reluctant to kind of give out substantial, I don't know about reluctant, but they just haven't given out substantial contracts to free agent position players under Farhan Zaidi, and this would be getting two good ones in Nimmo and Correa, but just not quite enough for me. And also, yeah, I think I explained it. Anyway, Ryan says, if the Giants and Yankees offer a similar $300+ million offer to Judge, do you think he would return to the Yankees? Also, do you think that he will make a decision in free agency early, or will the sweepstakes drag on through the winter? So this is a question I just simply don't know the answer to, and it only Judge and those close to him know. If he got a similar offer from the Giants and the Yankees, which one would he want to take? And for those of you who don't know, which is probably not many, I think a lot of people are aware of this, that Judge grew up a Giants fan in the, Fresno area. And so does he want to return home, or does he want to continue the legacy? And is he one of those guys who just wants to wear one uniform? Like, think about Buster Posey, right? Like, as much as if he was reaching free agency in the prime of his career, or at 31 or whatever that Judge is going to be, not necessarily the prime of his career, which is one of the red flags, if there are any, with Judge. And Braves fans were all over there talking about how we're going to get Posey because he's from he's from Georgia. Well, something Posey wanted that he was pretty clear about was to play for one team his entire career. That often means something to guys, and it's very possible that Judge is one of these guys who really values the legacy of just kind of being with that one team and making a real impact in a specific organization for your entire career, perhaps going into the Hall of Fame and having played with the New York Yankees, a historic team. It's a big deal, and it's possible that he wants that. Or he's like, I don't like playing here, too much of a spotlight. I want to return home and I want to play for the Giants. We have no idea, so I have no idea. I do want to say, I saw somewhere written that Judge might command $400 million. I think that's absurd. Quote me on that if I'm wrong, but the fact is he's 30 years old. He's going to be 31 next year, right? He's going to be 31 next year. And so for him to get $400 million, like, what are we imagining? 10 years, $40 million a year? He's not going to get 10 years, given that he's going to be 31. No team is going to do that. He's going to get 7, maybe 8 years would be my guess. And even $40 million a year over 7 or 8 years, I don't see that happening. I think 35-ish, 36 maybe over 7 or 8 years is probably where it ends up coming in. So $300 million, I think, is kind of pushing the upper bounds. So we look at, but this guy got $400 million or more, $350 million. Well, it matters how old they are, right? Because you're paying for Judge to turn into his mid-30s and even late 30s towards the end of this deal. So teams take that into account for sure. So it was just kind of reckless throwing out numbers like $400 million. $300 million is pushing the upper bounds, but I do think he could ultimately end up around there, but maybe a little less. And again, it's not a reflection of the talent, it's a reflection of the age of the player. So the next question from Adrian, who says, what can the Giants do to get better at the catcher position? I just feel like Bart isn't the guy. And then Red Fox Pyro says, do you think there's a need to trade for a catcher? How about Danny Jansen from the Blue Jays? They have a logjam of catchers, Alejandro Kirk, Moreno, I forget his first name, and Danny Jansen, etc., or maybe Sean Murphy. And so I'm with you guys. I agree that I'm just not completely sold on Joey Bart as the solution at this position for the Giants. And we've seen another year of the flaws of Joey Bart's offensive game. And it's just very much not what the Giants value. Like, they talked about how Brandon Belt, Farhan Zaidi said, Brandon Belt is exactly the type of exactly the type of offensive profile that they value. And if we had to say what's the type of offensive profile that they don't value, the answer would look something like Joey Bart. And I'm sorry to say it, it's a little bit harsh, but the reality is just the swing and miss and the chase, the wild swings, and then just in zone swing and miss, just whiffing on pitches that are hittable. So I don't know how they fix this issue. They could just be patient with him and realize he's not a finished product and go into next year. Look, the catcher position is weak for almost every team. And so there's that. And then they've got young guys. You know, they've got Patrick Bailey coming up, although I think he was in high A all year long. He was their first round pick a couple years ago. But yeah, I mean, and also if you go out and trade a Danny Jansen, you're pretty much signaling to the rest of the league that you don't believe in Joey Bart. So it's really hard to extract value in a trade in return when you're kind of signaling that you don't believe in the player. Like, even if you wait to acquire another catcher and you're just making Bart available, it's like, well, why are you trading this guy? So I don't know what they would even be able to get. So it's not a pretty situation per se, but Danny Jansen I love. And I mean, just the targeting the catchers in Toronto is a great idea because they do have 3 of them and it's a serious logjam, and I thought one of them might get dealt during the season. But yeah, Danny Jansen is much more of a fit, I would say, on the Giants. And so, yeah, targeting those guys, and specifically Jansen seems like the odd man out, I would imagine, when we look at those players in Toronto. And then Sean Murphy, but he's going to have a ton of value. And so it's hard. You don't want to give up like a ton of minor league talent just to get a catcher when you already have a guy who was a top prospect catcher. So it's a little bit murky. And when all is said and done, they very well could just go into the season next year again, just with the same catching tandem. It's a hard position. Like, when all was said and done, Bart was, I think, better than the average catcher offensively. So I want to make that clear. It's just he at times was a total black hole in the lineup. So coming up next, we're going to talk about this situation that multiple listeners have asked about, which is all these right-handed hitting corner infielders. Davis, J.D. Davis, Wilmer Flores, Evan Longoria, David Villar. How do they sort this out? Is it too many kind of players of a similar profile? We'll get into that in just a minute, but first. All right, as promised, Josh asks, J.D. Davis, Wilmer Flores, Evan Longoria, David Villar are all right-handed hitting corner infielders. All look to be on the roster for 2023, assuming Estrada at second, Crawford at short, La Stella cut. Where is the room for a new everyday infielder? Free agent outfielders are slim to none after Judge. How likely is it the roster turnover is less than we all want? So the thing I will say about this is, like, you're correct in that they're all right-handed hitting corner infielders. But here, I'll go through this one by one. J.D. Davis is arbitration eligible. It is not entirely clear that they will offer him a contract. They have that choice. They're not locked in, which they were with Darren Ruff. So that was part of the beauty of exchanging Ruff's contract for J.D. Davis plus 3 minor leaguers, is that Davis is arbitration eligible. They get to make a decision when the dust settles and they're thinking about their roster. And if they see this issue, they could say, look, we need to turn over this roster, and he creates a logjam in our infield, so we're going to non-tender him. That's a possibility. There's defensive limitations. There's swing and miss issues with J.D. Davis. We saw probably the best of J.D. Davis, but we also at times saw the worst of J.D. Davis. Wilmer Flores, yes, he's under contract. He'll be back for sure. Evan Longoria, again, a decision to make. They're not locked in. They have this club option with a buyout. And so, Farhan Zaidi said there's a role for Longoria on our team, but that was non-committal. It was saying there is a role. What is the role? But there is one potentially. And if that role is he's not starting, I don't know. Okay, so David Villar has minor league options, and so they're not kind of locked into David Villar. And also, when trade season comes around, which is all throughout the offseason, and Zaidi even said, free agency is not our only route here. We expect to kind of be really involved in the trade markets as well. And David Villar, like if what you're saying is true and they recognize kind of a logjam of similar profiled players, Villar becomes perhaps expendable and could be one of those guys who's dealt. So they're only locked into one guy here. They do owe Longoria $5 million for the buyout, and then Flores is under contract, but Davis and Villar, there's flexibility, and Longoria, they don't have to bring back. So I don't see them like backing themselves into a self-imposed corner where it's like, okay, we've tendered Davis a contract, we've decided to bring back Longoria, and we're not going to trade David Villar. Oh, what happened? Now we're kind of stuck with all these position players. Because, yeah, you're also not limited per se, but you're only going to have like 13 position players on your roster. There's 4 right there who kind of do the same types of things. And so, and then Crawford and Estrada, there's 6 guys. That's like half of them already right there. And you haven't even started looking at the outfield. So how likely is the roster turnover less than we all want? I don't think all that likely, because they obviously recognize they need to improve substantially. And so I don't see them just like accidentally showing up with the same roster. Could be wrong, but I doubt it. Michael says, is Farhan on the hot seat if we miss the playoffs and attendance continues to wane in 2023? So, yes, but what I want to say, like if they miss the playoffs again, then for sure there starts to be some squirming, and the organization will not be happy with the performance. Obviously, if like just catastrophic things go wrong, like unforeseen, unpredictable things go wrong next year, your top guys all get hurt or something, it matters what the circumstances are. But they need to improve the roster over the offseason. I don't think ownership is ready to just sit on their hands and go into next year with a similar roster that goes into next year and then doesn't make the playoffs again. What I will say about attendance, though, is that it's not necessarily Zaidi's fault that the attendance is declining. So I wouldn't think that they're going to judge him based on attendance per se. If you go out and you get star talent and attendance still isn't there, there's really not much that he can do. Marketing could be better. They could make the Ingame Fan Experience better. We've talked about that some over the course of the year, but it's kind of stale to go to Oracle Park. And to his credit, Andy Baggerly was the first to kind of mention this year. But it's true. I mean, they're playing the same stuff. They're not doing the dimming of the lights and a lot of teams are way ahead of this. The Dodgers, think about all the music and the organist that they have is excellent. And watch some postseason games and pay attention to the in-game kind of experience that you're seeing the fans have at their ballparks. And the Giants are behind in this regard in a major way, in my opinion. So that has a role in making the experience of going to the ballpark just kind of we've all experienced it. If you've been to some Giants games, it's the same as it's been for the last 12 years. So I think that could help. But also, league-wide attendance is down like 6% from the last full season to this full season. And the Giants are down about 8%. So they're really not that much different than average in terms of declines in attendance. We also had some playoff teams this year who saw attendance declines from 2019. And so even when there are good teams, and we saw it last year with the Giants, attendance was down. Yes, they were limited early in the year, but when the limits were off, the restrictions on attendance were taken away, then it still wasn't great, even though the Giants won a franchise record number of games. But it's a league-wide thing. The Astros had a decline in attendance, for example, that was similar to the Giants. And the Astros won 106 games this year and certainly have star talent. So it's just like with hitters, we say we must be aware of what the league average is. And when the league average changes, we need to know that, because we can't just say, look, this guy on my team, he got worse. Well, not necessarily if league average also got worse. And that is what we saw this year with offense. And it's what we're seeing with attendance in the wake of a pandemic. And I don't know exactly what the causes are, but hopefully it rebounds. But it's not all on Farhan Zaidi, and I'm sure they recognize that. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please smash the thumbs up button, hit the bell notification, whatever you can do. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And coming up later in the week, we're going to start doing player reviews all week. So you're not going to want to miss that. Anyway, thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.